Welcome to our channel, and today another story, another truth that cannot be ignored.
She was just a little girl, only 7 years old, when a rich man adopted her. It was a story you read about in fairy tales, but this wasn't a fairy tale. This was real life, and for 10 years, she had everything: a loving home, a beautiful room, a father who adored her. But on her 17th birthday, he gave her a letter that revealed the dark truth behind her adoption, a secret so shocking it would change her life forever. Before we continue, please support our new channel and hit the subscribe button. We publish new stories daily. Don't let them go unheard. So, her name was Lena, a bright-eyed girl with a spirit as wild as her curls. The day she met her father, David, was a blur of new colors and strange smells. The orphanage had been her whole world, a world of drab walls and shared spaces. But David's world was different. It was a world of sunlight streaming through tall windows, a world of quiet rooms filled with books, and a world of laughter that wasn't forced or hurried. David wasn't just wealthy. He was a titan of industry, a man whose name was synonymous with success. He owned a sprawling tech company, lived in a mansion nestled in the hills, and had a life most people only dreamed of. And yet, he had chosen her. He had chosen a little black girl with a bruised past and no family. To her young mind, it was a miracle. To the rest of the world, it was a curiosity. The first few years were a blissful whirlwind. David was everything a father should be. He taught her how to ride a bike, read her stories before bed, and was always there to catch her when she fell. He never treated her like she was a project or an act of charity. He treated her like she was his daughter, and in her heart she was. But the world outside wasn't so simple. She was black, and he was white. In the quiet, privileged world they lived in, it was a fact that was often ignored, but never forgotten. There were the subtle questions from well-meaning friends, the curious stares from strangers, and the whispered assumptions. She felt it, even if she couldn't articulate it. As she grew older, the differences became more pronounced. She would see how other people looked at her father, and then looked at her. She would hear the way some people spoke to her differently than they spoke to the other kids at her private school. It was a constant, low hum of discomfort, a feeling she couldn't shake. She loved her father, and she knew he loved her, but she began to wonder, why her? Why had he chosen her, a little black girl from a city orphanage, when he could have had anyone? The question haunted her, a tiny whisper in the back of her mind.
On the morning of her 17th birthday, David sat her down at the breakfast table. He looked at her, and his eyes, usually so full of warmth, held a deep sadness she had never seen before. He handed her a thick, sealed envelope. "Happy birthday, Lena," he said softly. "Everything you need to know is in here, and I'm so sorry." The words hung in the air, heavy and full of unspoken meaning. Her hands trembled as she opened the envelope. Inside, there was a stack of papers and a handwritten letter from David. She read his letter first, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm in her chest.
"My dearest Lena," the letter began, "by the time you read this, you will be 17, the age where you are no longer a child, but not yet a woman. You are on the verge of your own life, and you deserve to know the truth of how you came into mine. This is a story I have been too much of a coward to tell you in person, and for that, I am truly sorry." He wrote about his life before he met her, about his wife, Sarah, the love of his life. He described their happiness, their dream of having a family, and their devastating struggle with infertility. They had tried everything, but nothing worked. They had finally decided to adopt. But they didn't just want to adopt any child. Sarah, an activist and a social worker, had always wanted to adopt a child from the inner city. She believed there were so many children who were overlooked, who deserved a chance at a different life. They had started the process, filled out the paperwork, and were finally matched with a beautiful 3-year-old girl. A little black girl with a mischievous smile and a laugh that could light up a room. Her name was Lena. The letter went on to describe the day they were supposed to meet her, the day they were supposed to become a family. David had a big meeting that day, a deal that would secure his company's future. He had told Sarah he would be late, that she should go ahead to the orphanage and he would meet her there. Sarah, impatient and excited, had gone alone. He didn't know it then, but it was the last time he would ever see her. On her way to the orphanage, her car was hit by a drunk driver. Sarah was killed instantly. He was a widower. In a single moment, his entire world had been shattered. His future, his family, all of his dreams, gone. The letter explained his grief, his rage, his unbearable pain. He had tried to move on, he had tried to forget, but he couldn't. He couldn't forget his wife, and he couldn't forget the child they were supposed to have. He had found out that the drunk driver who killed his wife had been a rich, privileged man who had gotten away with a slap on the wrist. David had used his influence, his wealth, and his power to ensure the man went to prison. It was a small act of justice, but it was not enough. The letter then took a sharp turn. It explained the real reason he had adopted her. He had been so consumed by grief and rage that he had made himself a promise that he would do something for the child his wife never got to meet. He had found her again, a little older, still in the orphanage, and he had adopted her, not just to give her a home, but as a tribute to Sarah, as a way to honor the family they were supposed to have. He had adopted her not just out of love, but out of a deep and profound sense of grief and guilt. Lena finished the letter, her hands shaking so violently she could barely hold the pages. The words swam before her eyes. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was a memorial, a monument to a woman she had never known. Her father's love, the home she had, her entire life, it was all tied to a tragedy she had no part in. She wasn't her daughter. She was a ghost, a reminder of what he had lost. The pain was a physical thing, a sharp, cold knife twisting in her gut. She had always felt like an outsider, and now she knew why. She was. She wasn't adopted because he loved her. She was adopted because he loved someone else. She was a substitute, a replacement, a living memory. She ran from the house, the letter still clutched in her hand. She ran until her lungs burned, her heart a raw, bleeding wound. She found herself at a small park she used to play in as a child. She sat on a swing, pushing herself back and forth, trying to make sense of the overwhelming rush of emotions. For 10 years she had lived a lie. A beautiful, wonderful lie, but a lie nonetheless. She felt a deep sense of betrayal, a profound sadness for the little girl she used to be, the little girl who believed in miracles. But as the sun began to set, a different emotion started to take hold. Anger. Why hadn't he told her? Why had he let her believe for so long that she was special, that she was chosen, for all the right reasons? When she finally returned home, it was late. The house was quiet and dark. She found David sitting in his study, a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring into the fireplace. He looked older, more tired than she had ever seen him. He looked up as she entered, and his eyes were full of a painful resignation. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just held up the letter. "Why?" she asked, her voice quiet but filled with a controlled fury. "Why did you do this? Why couldn't you have just told me?" He took a deep breath, and for the first time in her life, she saw him truly vulnerable. "I couldn't," he said, his voice raw. "I was so lost. I was so broken. And when I saw you, you reminded me so much of her, of the dream we had. I know it wasn't right. I know I should have told you, but you were just a child, And I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't want you to feel like a project or an obligation. I wanted you to feel loved. But I wasn't loved, she said, tears finally beginning to fall. I was a memory, a way for you to deal with your grief. He stood up and walked over to her. He didn't touch her. He just stood there, his hands in his pockets, his shoulders slumped. You are wrong, Lena. I started with a broken heart. I started with a promise to a dead woman. But somewhere along the way, it changed. You changed me. You brought me back to life. You taught me how to love again. The moment you first called me Dad, it wasn't a lie. It was the truth. You are my daughter. Not because I chose you to honor Sarah, but because I chose you. Because you are my daughter in every way that matters. She looked at him, searching his eyes for any hint of a lie. But there was none. There was only a profound, heartbreaking honesty. She saw the man who had taught her to ride a bike, the man who had stayed up all night when she was sick, the man who had celebrated her triumphs and comforted her failures. She saw the father she had always known. But what about her? She asked, her voice a fragile whisper. What about Sarah? He walked over to a bookshelf and pulled out a small, worn photo album. He sat back down and opened it. The pages were filled with photos of a beautiful, smiling woman. He began to tell her stories about Sarah's love for social justice, her passion for helping others, her dream of adopting a black child and giving them a life full of opportunities. He showed her photos of Sarah working at the orphanage, a place that was so familiar to Lena. He showed her a photo of Sarah holding a little girl, her face beaming with joy. A little girl that looked exactly like a younger Lena. And as she looked at the photo, a single undeniable truth hit her. Sarah didn't just want to adopt a black child, she had already chosen her. She had already fallen in love with her. She looked at David, and a new wave of emotion washed over her. Not anger, but a deep, profound sadness and gratitude. He wasn't just grieving for his wife, he was also grieving for her, for the mother she never got to know. He had carried the weight of both their sorrows for a decade, all in an effort to give her a life filled with the love that he and Sarah had dreamed of giving her. She would have loved you so much, Lena, he said, his voice thick with emotion. She would have been so proud of the woman you've become. And in that moment, the lie dissolved. It wasn't the lie anymore. It was a legacy. She wasn't a ghost. She was the living embodiment of a promise, a dream, a love that was so big it transcended death. He had adopted her not just for Sarah, but for himself. He had adopted her because she was the daughter he was always meant to have, and he had given her a life that both he and her mother had dreamed of giving her. From that day on, their relationship changed. The foundation was still there, the love was still there, but now it was built on a new, more honest truth. They were a family, not because of a tragic past, but because of a shared present and a future they would build together. Lena finally understood the depth of her father's love, a love so powerful it had been born from the ashes of heartbreak, and it had grown to become the most important thing in his life. She was no longer just his adopted daughter, she was his second chance at happiness. What do you think of this story? Have you ever had a moment where you found out a surprising truth about your family? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this.